I was going to try and do another one of my little funny, quick cut intros, but in lieu of events that have happened in the country in the past 72 hours, instead we'll open in prayer. Let God arise, let his enemies be scattered, and let those who hate him flee before his face. May they vanish like smoke and melt like wax before the presence of the Lord. Hi everyone, Nick Langan back with Sixpence Productions. Thanks for returning. This is the third video in our series on our current project, In the Shadow of High Places, a pro-life supernatural thriller series. And in the first video, I covered a little bit about how the company was formed. In the second video, I covered a little bit how the book Unborn, which the series is based on, came to be written. And now we start to get into what I think is really the most fun stuff, where we talk about our process, our creative process for actually creating the show. What goes into adapting source material. When the Lord of the Rings films were released, the Peter Jackson movies, people were astounded at how faithful that adaptation was. The books had been long thought to be unadaptable because Tolkien crams so much stuff into there. A lot of people pointed out there were lots of things missing from the movies that were in the books. Tom Bombadil being a classic funny example, but there's all sorts of stuff. The passage of time in the Lord of the Rings books takes much longer than in the movies. It's kind of ambiguous at some points, but it definitely seems to be shorter in the movies between Frodo getting the ring and going on the journey and all that. So when we got the book, this is really the first time that I was tackling an adaptation as a writer. It's also the first adaptation project that we're taking on. The first pilot that we shot was a totally original idea, and we've done a few little minor commercials for people and things like that, all original ideas. I think what it boils down to when you're adapting something is you have to know very well the strengths of your medium, and you have to know very well the strengths of the original medium, and then you have to try and bridge that gap in a way that's organic. So, for example, going back to The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien is not particularly descriptive in most of his battles. They happen, it's maybe a page, 2 pages at most. I think the Battle of Pelennor Fields in the book is like 2 pages. But obviously that's because he's not very interested in a blow-by-blow account. He describes in the same way that a general giving a debrief may describe the tactical decisions that each side made. If Rohan did this and Gondor did that. But when you have a movie, obviously then you have to figure out, okay, but these are important events, even if they're not given a lot of page time in the book, so we have to adapt certain things. The fight at Weathertop between Aragorn and the Ringwraiths, you get the idea. The book Unborn and the story, as we've discussed, really focuses on these 2 sisters that are separated. They have divergent paths. And we have other storylines as well, obviously, that are equally important, but taking them as an example. There's Hannah, who's the sort of good sister, and Kristen, who is fallen away and is opposite end of the spectrum. And a lot of the book is, especially the first part of the book, is flashbacks and internal dialogue, recollections, thoughts, right? How do you put that on screen? And that became one of our initial challenges. In addition to them, in the series and also in the book, we have these supernatural characters. Now, in the book, we don't see a lot of them. We know that there's this demon, Malbus, in human form, running around causing mischief. We know that there's a few angel characters, most notably Nova, who's this sort of pseudo-guardian angel, but also seems to be doing other things. And Archangel Gabriel in the book shows up later. He will hopefully be in our series as well. But in the book, it's almost entirely written from the perspective of these 2 human sisters. And so a lot of the spiritual warfare elements, a lot of the actions that those supernatural characters are taking, we don't see, with a few notable exceptions, only when they interact directly with the sisters, or they leave notes or sort of clues behind the scenes as to what's going on, but a lot of it's just left to the imagination. That's an artistic choice that Lona Schaefer, the book author, made. But it leaves us with some problems from a visual media perspective that I think was just a different sort of challenge in the book. And then the other storyline that we have is our undercover journalists who are researching this black market organ sales business. And that is secondary in the book, but very important. This has to be a series. And I'm partial to 8 to 12 episode series. I think that, especially with ensemble casts and things like that, you have a much better chance of being able to explore character arcs, storylines, things like that would probably get rushed in a traditional hour-and-a-half, 2-hour movie. It can be done with certain things, but I'm partial to series, and so is our director, Scott. And so the first thing, looking at all these different characters, was, all right, if we're going to bring this to the screen, how do we successfully fill the time without it feeling needless? I'm sure my older audience here will remember when you used to have series, TV shows that actually ran for 22 to 24 episodes. You'd always tell when the writers were like taking a break or trying to figure out how to get back to the main storyline or just buying time because they would have just a filler episode or two, right, that had nothing to do with the overarching story. Maybe there'd be one hint of something, but it would get, sort of monster of the week sort of thing. And then you'd be like, oh, even if it was really cool, this doesn't really fit in the narrative. That used to be much more common on episodic TV that was on a network. We wanted to avoid that. We didn't want any episodes feeling like filler. I wanted 8 to 10 episodes, and we settled on 8, I think, once we did our outlines. We'll see. It could always change, but we settled on 8. One of the first changes that we made, in our view, was the book focuses almost entirely on the two sisters and their immediate family. We're going to expand that. We're going to bump the journalists up to have their own complete storyline, the investigators, and we're going to bump up the supernatural stuff, and we did that for a couple of reasons. We also bumped up, there's references to the girl's father, who's a Vietnam War veteran, and there's some scenes that we see from his perspective in the book, but we decided to also bump that up because that was really interesting. We're both fans of history, and so we thought, oh, that's really interesting, and also having the Vietnam War serve as a analogy to what's going on in the present storylines seemed like a really good idea. So this was our brainstorming at first. Okay, we're going to bump up these storylines. So we have now the sisters, the journalists, the Vietnam War, and the angels and demons. Now, we knew that we were going to have to bump up the supernatural storylines as well because, like I said, in the book, a lot of that is behind the scenes, which is really cool and works in the book when you're talking about more of a drama with these two sisters. In a visual medium like TV or movies, you're going to be dying to see that stuff. That doesn't mean that you couldn't do it and still keep everything behind the scenes, but we didn't want to do that. We wanted to see some of this stuff, and we wanted to explore other themes that the book hints at but doesn't dive into as much. We wanted to explore the spiritual warfare in this artistic, fantastical way. We wanted to see angels and demons duking it out on screen. This gave us an outlet for action that might not be happening and let us lean into and get some of that more visually appealing stuff that we wanted to see. The other thing that we did, and I'm going to bring it back to The Lord of the Rings, is we thought about, okay, we have characters, but what is it that makes The Lord of the Rings a good adaptation? And I think ultimately it's a theme. They transported the themes of Tolkien onto the movie. And so even though they may have cut out a lot of little details and even bigger details in the books, in the movies, it still feels like The Lord of the Rings. This is not exactly a science, it's more of an art. And if you're watching behind-the-scenes things of Lord of the Rings, they were rewriting those scripts every day. And I imagine we'll be doing the same thing when we start actually filming. Oh, let's change this, tweak this little detail. Because, one, visual arts like this are collaborative, and some things might come out on set that you never expected, but make it so much better. But the other thing is figuring out the themes and what can go and what cannot. What are the principal things and what cannot. It can be hard, especially when you're in the trenches writing something. And sometimes a bolt of inspiration just strikes you when you're out on set. And you're like, oh, let's change this. Oh, we have this angle. Let's do that. We decided, okay, what are the main themes? One is, what does it mean to be human? Right? So there's obviously this question when you're talking about abortion and things like that. Is it healthcare? Is it a woman's right? Is it life at conception? Obviously, I believe a certain way, but that is a theme. What is it to be human? And you have these, not only do you have these human characters running around, but you also have these supernatural characters running around that are fantastic foils and show specific aspects or wills, but maybe a lack of complete humanity. The other theme was obviously a very classic fantasy one. It's good and evil, right? Good and evil, the battle of good and evil. God's forces on one side, the devil's on the other. But we wanted to do something really interesting with that and show a lot of moral grayness. And I think we have ideas to communicate that in a really interesting and unique way. That has to do more with maybe some visual choices that we're going to make. And then finally, and maybe this is a subset really of the good and evil theme, but we wanted to dive into spiritual warfare and spiritual consequence. You know, we often hear with some of this stuff, oh, there's spiritual consequences to everything you do. There's spiritual consequences to abortion. But I don't think if you believe that, I don't think we as Christians do a particularly good job of showing the spiritual reality on in any meaningful way. There have been a lot of Hollywood movies that have played with certain cool and weird aspects of Christianity. Well, we've got angels, or we've got demons, or we've got ghosts, or we've got whatever. But we're the guys that believe that stuff. We're the guys maybe that have real experience with it, and we're not doing a good job of showing that and its importance. Now, I think there's a tendency with certain Christian artists to want to not draw too much attention. You don't want to draw too much attention to the devil. You don't want to draw too much attention to the supernatural side of things, because ultimately you want to just teach people how to live a good life. And I totally get that. But we have this great access to all these tremendous stories, all these figures, all these characters, all these supernatural beings and entities from the Bible and beyond, church fathers, other writings, and we just stay away from it as Christians, I think, because we don't know how to handle them. And that's a real letdown. We have a tremendous amount of fantastic stories and history to pull from. And most of the time, the Christian movie industry stays in the bounds of the sort of maybe a cheesy holiday movie, maybe a sort of sitcom, an emotional drama with a sermon and altar call at the end. If that's your bag, that's cool, but that's not mine, and I don't think that's effective. I don't think that's what most people want. And it's certainly not good entertainment, and you slide into the same thing that we are upset with the other side of the aisle doing. Oh, you're just preaching at me. Oh, you're just beating me over the head with your political message. What have you. I don't think that's a recipe for success, either in changing people's minds or in art. Story must come first. And so we expanded a lot of that supernatural stuff so the characters don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but we as an audience now, we're privy to see what's going on. And we tried to explain a lot of the supernatural warfare that's going on in more physical terms, or at least visual terms, which I think is awesome. It's something that I'm really proud of the scripts that we have, and makes for a really, I think, hopefully engaging, weaved together web of these stories. How do you communicate in a sort of fantastical way what it feels like to be racked by guilt and your own thoughts and not be able to sleep? How do you communicate in a visual way that feeling, what temptation is? People have done it, and some people have done a good job. I think we have a fairly unique take on it, and I think it's going to be really, really neat. Those were the steps that went into our adaptations. We've got a very detailed outline. We have the first 2 episodes completely written. 3rd episode was just finished the other day, and I'm really looking forward to diving into more details of our process. It was lots of reading, lots of note-taking, very detailed breaking down of all the major storylines, simplifying everything as much as possible so that then we could effectively make sure and we'll still be going back to the drawing board and reweaving things together. If you haven't already and you're interested in what we're doing, please like and subscribe. Follow us over on Instagram /Sixpence Productions. Follow us on Facebook, same thing, /Sixpence Productions. And also, there'll be a link below for 7 Weeks Coffee. 7 Weeks Coffee is a pro-life coffee company. They donate a portion of all their proceeds to various pro-life initiatives, pregnancy centers, that sort of thing. They're a small business. Their coffee is delicious. Go ahead and check them out through the link below. Order 1, order 5. They have many different blends. I like the Hope blend, but there's a bunch of different ones. And support us by supporting another local business. Also, we are still fundraising for a trailer/proof of concept for In the Shadow Fireplaces. We are on Give Send Go. It's GiveSendGo /High Places. Link below. We are shooting to raise $8,000 to do a trailer proof of concept to get in front of some of these bigger investors that we have avenues to. We've raised about $2,000, a little over $1,000 through the site, and then another $1,000 through a private investor. So if you can help out in any way, even $5, $10, we appreciate it. And lastly, I'd just like to ask, if you are out there, you like what we're doing, you can't support us any other way, please pray for us. We are really working hard to change entertainment, and there's other people doing it too. Pray for them as well. It's going to take a whole lot of people to turn this thing around, but the good news is I believe that we can actually do it with current entertainment options, technology options, and the climate as far as people actually desiring a difference. So until next time, check us out and subscribe, and I will see you on the next video.